Our next example is in broadcast authentication. I should set the stage by telling you about the setting. Computer communications came of age in the late 1970s and originally called the ARPANET. The network was designed to communicate between computers across a few institutions. Everything was well and good as long as you just had naive academics, well-meaning to be sure, who were communicating with each other. Issues of trust were transparent. But of course, the moment a larger community gets involved, security and trust becomes more difficult to verify. The early issues in the 70s were twofold. How could one guarantee the integrity of one's communication, and how could one guarantee the confidentiality of one's communication? In other words, how does one ensure that a third party does not spoof one, pretend to be somebody else? In other words, the integrity of the communication is maintained. And how does one ensure that a third party does not eavesdrop on a private conversation? Now, these issues were solved by beautiful number-theoretic methods which provided cryptographic protection. So today, if you get onto a website and you go to a secure website to make, for example, a financial transaction, and you see the word HTTPS appearing on a browser address window, that will signal to you that your transaction is being protected from prying eyes and that a nefarious individual can't insert themselves into the loop and pretend to be you. So this is a measure of cryptographic protection. What it does is it provides guarantees of confidentiality and integrity of information at a cost. The cost is in terms of the computations that had to be performed by the receiver to verify the bonafides of the transmitter. Now, things were well and good through the 80s until the communication explosion really exploded with the development of the internet in 1994. And at this stage, a new security threat became apparent, and we discovered to our chagrin that our protocols and our systems were not really well equipped to handle this new threat. This threat is called a denial of service threat to the system. An attacker, a nefarious individual, finds they are cryptographically blocked from spoofing or from eavesdropping. So they're cryptographically blocked from affecting the integrity or the confidentiality of the communication. But they decide that no matter, they will simply overwhelm a server by sending a flood of messages which are spurious, which the server requires time and effort to verify and discard. But if you send enough, the server runs out of computational resources and crashes. And examples of denial of service attacks have been in the news over the last decade. Major corporations, even countries, have been attacked by third parties. This is a difficult strategic and security threat to handle, partly because our infrastructure was not designed with these threats in mind. Fortunately, there are avenues, steps one can take to mitigate such threats. And a key here is to understand that the needs of an attacker and the needs of a legitimate client are fundamentally different. The attacker is looking to take down a server, a country, a large corporation, a government. For his attack to work, the computers which receive the information must process a large chunk of what he sends. If one can discard a large chunk of what he sends, then you end up defanging the attack. And so here's a very simple strategy. In a randomized way, discard packets that arrive at your door and keep, let's say, only a small fraction p of those packets. If you did this, for example, if p is 0.1, then you accept only 1 in 10 packets randomly selected, and so the attacker can't game the system, and in one fell swoop you discard 90% of the attack packets. If you can handle 10% of the attacker's attack, then you're in business. Right? Your computational load is now under control. So here is a very simple way of reducing the intensity of an attack. Simply discard stuff. Of course, this comes at a cost, because you discard not just spurious attack packets, but legitimate client packets. Now, what does the client need? The client has got a signed packet, cryptographically signed, which authenticates him. He needs you to examine one packet. The attacker needs you to examine essentially all his packets. Here's a very simple client strategy. Send a few copies of your packet. Each copy is examined with, say, a chance of 1 in 10, or more generally, probability p. But if you send just a few packets, the chance of at least one being examined goes up very, very quickly. So, for example, if p is 0.1, 90% of the packets are discarded. Then if n is 25, you just repeat your one packet 25 times. Remember, the opposition has sent 1 billion packets. You've sent your one packet 25 times. 90% of the opposition's attack has been eroded and thrown away. But of your 25 packets, the chance that at least one is examined by the receiver to establish your bonafides is now about 92%. And if you send just 40 packets, your chance of getting at least one packet through jumps to 98%. Now, how does one do the analysis? Well, each packet gets through or not for you with a small probability. It's a rare event. N is moderate here, about 40, 50, 60. You're governed by a Poisson system approximately. The probability that no packet gets through is the Poisson mask probability with k equal to 0. The probability that at least one packet is accepted by additivity is 1 minus the probability that none are accepted. And there you go. Here's a very, very simple mechanism which can be readily implemented. This was suggested by Gunter, Kahn, Tan, and Venkatesh in 2004.